For decades, Engelbert Humperdinck has shared stories of his friend, Elvis Presley. But as one of the last living legends of his era, his perspective at 89 years old carries a different weight. He's not just sharing anecdotes anymore. He's working to define the legacy of a man he knew intimately. He saw behind the curtain of the world's biggest star. Into the Las Vegas dressing rooms where the capes and jumpsuits came off. What he saw was a surprising friendship, a shocking vulnerability, and a kindness the world rarely got to see. While he's spoken before, time has revealed a deeper truth, a final word on the man he called his friend. What was the real story of the two kings of Vegas? The answer does more than just share a memory. It redefines a legend. To understand their friendship, you first have to understand the world they ruled. Las Vegas in the late 60s and early 70s wasn't just a city, it was a kingdom. And in this kingdom, two names reigned supreme. Lit up in giant letters over the strip. On one side, you had Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, back on stage with the force of a supernova. On the other, Engelbert Humperdinck, the British king of romance, whose velvet voice sold out the same massive showrooms. The media, always hungry for drama, loved to cast them as rivals. It was an easy headline. Both men had that rare, electric charisma. Both had the jet black hair, the smoldering looks, and a stage presence that could hypnotize thousands. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding, one built not on rivalry, but on a deep and genuine respect. Their first meeting is the stuff of Vegas legend. Engelbert was headlining, and word got out that Elvis was in the house. Mid-show, Engelbert told the crowd, "Ladies and gentlemen, the great Elvis Presley is in the audience tonight." What happened next stopped the show cold. Elvis, who was sitting in a booth, stood up. He was wearing one of his signature capes and, with a theatrical flourish, opened it wide like a superhero. As Humperdinck recalls, the room went absolutely berserk. For a full 10 minutes, the applause for the king was so thunderous that Engelbert struggled to get his own show back on track. Finally joking into the mic, "Whoa, Elvis, this is my show." It was a moment that could have been tense, but it became the start of a friendship. Backstage, there was no rivalry, only grace. Elvis didn't act like a man who had just stolen the spotlight. Instead, he was surprisingly humble. He embraced Engelbert and thanked him for the introduction. Humperdinck was floored. "Elvis, I can't thank you enough for being at my show," he replied. In that moment, the public narrative of competition dissolved into the private reality of two artists who understood the bizarre pressure they were both under. From then on, a real friendship grew. They became each other's biggest fans. When one was performing, the other would often slip into the back of the showroom to watch and learn. Engelbert was captivated by Elvis's stagecraft, admitting, "I must say that watching him working really taught me a lot of things about show business, because I think he was the greatest artist I've ever seen on stage as a performer." He later joked, "If you're going to steal, then steal from the best," which Elvis was. This admiration went both ways. They'd playfully swap musical ideas, and even recorded their own versions of songs, like Spanish Eyes and Put Your Hand in the Hand. The so-called rivalry became a running joke between them, especially when it came to the sideburns. Engelbert had been rocking his signature sideburns since 1965. A few years later, Elvis adopted a similar, even more dramatic style for his iconic jumpsuit era. Engelbert never missed a chance to tease him about it. "He stole something from me, my sideburns," Humperdinck would say with a laugh, adding that he even told Elvis to his face, "I had it first." Elvis would just grin and shoot back with his famous charm, "If it looks good on you, it's going to look good on me." There was even a story that when a designer sketched Elvis's legendary white jumpsuit, she included the long sideburns. Elvis reportedly saw it and drawled, "Hell, that's not me, that's Engelbert Humperdinck." It was a playful nod from one king to another, perfectly capturing their relationship, a bit competitive on the surface, but built on real affection and a shared sense of humor. The Elvis the world saw was a god in a jumpsuit, but the Elvis that Engelbert Humperdinck knew was a completely different person. Away from the roar of the crowd, the larger-than-life persona fell away, revealing a man of surprising gentleness and deep kindness. Engelbert has consistently described Elvis as one of the most kind-hearted, benevolent people you will ever come across. He recalled stories of Elvis's spontaneous generosity, like seeing someone on the street in need, and without a second thought, emptying his pockets to help them. He would be driving in his car and see somebody on the street in bare feet, and whatever he had in his pocket, he would take and give it to them and say, "Get yourself a pair of shoes." Humperdinck shared, this humility was, for Engelbert, the most profound lesson he learned from his friend. In an industry built on ego, Elvis was different. He never took his image seriously. Engelbert observed, Elvis understood that the icon on stage was a creation, and he shared that wisdom with Engelbert, telling him it was vital to remain humble and grounded. It was advice that Engelbert took to heart, crediting it with shaping his own long career. "He taught me that too," Engelbert reflected. "I find humility is a great thing to have in one's life." He had it, and so do I. But as their friendship deepened, Engelbert started to see a fragility in Elvis, a shadow the stage lights couldn't erase. He saw past the adoring crowds and the entourage and glimpsed the profound loneliness at the center of it all. Engelbert had long been suspicious of Colonel Tom Parker's iron-fisted control over Elvis's life. I think he was mishandled by his friends, he later said, believing they didn't do enough to protect him from the pressures of his career. He saw a man who wasn't just working hard, he was being worked to the bone. Then there was the wound of being misunderstood, to be loved by millions, but truly known by almost no one. Engelbert was one of the few who saw the sincere, gentle soul who was so far removed from his explosive stage persona. There was another, even deeper reason for their bond. According to what Elvis told his own bodyguards, his affection for Engelbert came from a place of profound personal loss. Engelbert, he felt, was like the twin brother he had lost at birth. Jesse Garon, when Engelbert heard this years later, he was deeply touched. It reframed their entire friendship. For Elvis, it was a connection that resonated with his own history and sorrow. He saw a kindred spirit in Engelbert, a reflection of a life that might have been. Engelbert recognized a crucial difference between them. He knew how to step back and preserve a part of himself away from the spotlight. Elvis, it seemed, never learned how. He was trapped by the very myth he created. And as the years wore on, the weight of that myth was becoming unbearable. By the mid-1970s, the endless cycle of shows and the relentless pressure to be superhuman every night were clearly taking a toll on Elvis. The magnetic energy he radiated on stage was being replaced by a profound weariness, a vulnerability that was deeply concerning. To his friend, Engelbert didn't need a single dramatic confession to see what was happening. He saw it in the exhaustion behind Elvis's eyes and heard it in the changing tone of their conversations. The phone calls became more philosophical, more somber, laced with a sense of foreboding. He saw a man who was increasingly isolated, surrounded by powerful people who may not have had his best interests at heart. Engelbert has openly expressed his regret for not doing more, for not trying to break through the wall of handlers that surrounded Elvis. I wished I had the courage and power to have done it, he admitted in a 2017 interview, reflecting on seeing his friend in a fragile condition. But he was surrounded with such powerful people that it was impossible to get near him. Enough to say, Elvis, stop. This wasn't about one secret conversation in a dressing room. It was a slow, painful realization over time. Engelbert saw a friend who felt trapped by his own legend, exhausted from being constantly packaged, marketed, and sold. He was the most famous person on the planet, yet he was profoundly alone. The fans saw the sequins and the smile, but they didn't see the doubts and the fears that fame had built around him like a gilded cage. Engelbert was witnessing the tragedy unfold in slow motion. He saw a man who wasn't just tired of the pressure, he was being consumed by it. He wasn't hearing a single cryptic warning. He was seeing a friend slowly fade, knowing he was on a runaway train but unable to find the brakes. This growing awareness cast a dark shadow over their friendship and set the stage for the news that would soon break the world's heart. On August 16, 1977, the world stood still. The news broke, Elvis Presley was dead at 42. For the public, it was a shocking tragedy. For Engelbert Humperdinck, it was a heartbreaking, though not entirely surprising, conclusion to the path he had watched his friend walk. He remembers exactly where he was when he heard. He was in Lake Tahoe, preparing for a show. That night's performance was supposed to include a dramatic trilogy of songs that Elvis had also famously performed. But as the curtain rose, Engelbert was paralyzed by grief. The curtains came up. For me to do the trilogy, he recalled, I was not there. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't put myself through something that Elvis did on his death day. In the weeks and months that followed, Engelbert grieved privately. He didn't believe in sensational theories, but he felt the official story of cardiac arrest was a tragic oversight. He believed his friend's death was a result of being overworked and mishandled, but speaking out felt wrong. It would have been a violation of the friendship they shared. So, he honored Elvis's memory with dignified silence, choosing to remember the man, not the myth. This feeling of missed opportunities became a source of lasting pain. There were nights Elvis called me and I didn't pick up, he would confess years later, his voice thick with emotion. He wished he'd had the courage to do more, to say more, to somehow pierce the suffocating bubble of the entourage. For years, he carried that quiet regret. He continued his own legendary career, but the memory of his friend never faded. He chose to remember the vibrant, kind, and charismatic man he knew, the one who embraced him backstage instead of shaking his hand. He protected that memory, not as a secret but as a sacred trust. It was only as he got older that he began to speak more openly, not for headlines, but for the sake of his friend's legacy. To ensure the world remembered the real Elvis Presley, he was proud to call a friend. As the years passed, Engelbert Humperdinck watched Elvis become more than a man. He became an industry, an image on a lunchbox. He is the most impersonated man in the world, his music a timeless monument. But for Engelbert, the most important part of the story, Elvis's humanity, was getting lost. And so, in his later years, he has made it his quiet mission to set the record straight. One of his public regrets is the duet that never was. He has spoken about the missed opportunity to record with Elvis, a collaboration that could have been a monumental moment in music. That decision has stayed with him, not for the potential hit record, but for the lost chance to create something beautiful with his friend. It stands as a powerful what-if, a symbol of the moments we let slip by, but his reflections go deeper. What Engelbert wants the world to remember most about Elvis are the qualities the cameras rarely caught. He speaks tirelessly of Elvis's deep, unwavering humility. He never took his image seriously. He had a lot of humility, and he was very charismatic. Engelbert has said repeatedly, he wants people to know about the quiet benevolence, the man who would give a stranger the money from his pocket for a new pair of shoes. He wants to preserve the memory of the true and generous gentleman who always looked you right in the eye. In sharing his memories, Engelbert isn't trying to tarnish a legacy. He's trying to complete it. He believes that to truly appreciate the light Elvis brought to the world, you have to understand the darkness he fought. The story of his struggle doesn't diminish the legend, it humanizes it. It's a final act of friendship, a way of saying, this was the real man. This was the friend I knew, and he deserves to be remembered for his kindness and his struggle, not just for his fame. By speaking out, Engelbert Humperdinck is giving his friend one last gift. He is pulling back the curtain just enough for the world to see the man behind it, not the icon, not the product, but the funny, kind, generous, and deeply lonely soul he was privileged to know. His testimony is a vital piece of history, delivered with the weight and wisdom of a life fully lived. It's a final tribute from one king to another, a heartfelt attempt to ensure that the true legacy of Elvis Presley, the kindness, the humility, the humanities, what endures. If these powerful memories from Engelbert Humperdinck moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more stories from the legends of music history. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What does the music and legacy of Elvis Presley mean to you? The story of Engelbert Humperdinck and Elvis Presley is more than just a footnote in music history. It's a powerful story about an unlikely friendship, the crushing weight of fame, and the quiet ways we honor those we love. For years, Engelbert protected his friend's memory with his quiet grief. Now, by sharing his perspective, he protects his friend's legacy. He reminds us that behind every icon, there is a human being, and that the most profound truths are often found not in the roar of the crowd, but in the quiet moments between two friends, backstage, long after the lights have gone down.